It's the end of an era for Sarah Ferguson. After nearly 40 years of being known as the Duchess of York, the woman once celebrated for her fiery spirit and royal charm has been forced to erase her title and, perhaps, the identity that defined her entire life. Just 4 days after her ex-husband, Prince Andrew, agreed to give up his royal titles, Sarah made a quiet but devastating move. She scrubbed every trace of Duchess of York from her public profiles. No announcement, no statement, just a sudden disappearance that left royal watchers stunned. To the world, it looked like a small change online, but for Sarah, it was the collapse of everything she'd built, her brand, her legacy, her place in the royal story. Behind palace walls, insiders say she's been unraveling, caught between heartbreak and fury as her last link to the monarchy is severed for good. Because this isn't just about a lost title. It's about what happens when 40 years of royal privilege, fame, and identity vanish overnight, and how one woman is left to pick up the pieces while the crown turns its back. But what exactly happened behind those gates at Royal Lodge? Why did Prince Andrew surrender his title now? And how did this decision push Sarah Ferguson to the brink? Let's break down the royal chaos and the emotional fallout that's turning one of Britain's most familiar figures into its most fragile.
Sarah Ferguson makes a major social media change after her ex, Prince Andrew, gives up his royal title. 4 days after her ex-husband, Prince Andrew, announced he would no longer use his royal titles such as Duke of York, his ex-wife has updated her social media to remove references to her Duchess of York title.
When the news first broke, even long-time royal insiders were caught off guard. Prince Andrew, once the proud Duke of York, announced that he would no longer use any of his royal titles. It sounded like just another headline in a long string of royal shake-ups, until people realized what it meant for Sarah Ferguson. For nearly 4 decades, Duchess of York wasn't just a title to Sarah, it was her lifeline. It was the one thing that kept her connected to the monarchy long after her 1996 divorce. It was the name she built her books, her charities, her brand, and even her personal identity around. But within days of Andrew's announcement, Sarah made a quiet yet symbolic move that spoke volumes. She updated all of her social media profiles, deleting the words Duchess of York. No statement, no public goodbye. Just silence and an empty bio where the royal title used to be. To the public, it might have looked like a simple update, but for Sarah, insiders say it felt like the ground was pulled from under her. Friends described her as shaken, furious, and heartbroken, realizing that the title she had defended for so long was gone for good. One source claimed she had begged Andrew not to do it, but the decision came straight from King Charles III himself. The new monarch was done with indulgences. The Yorks, in his view, had become a liability. The tension reportedly exploded behind the gates of Royal Lodge. What began as a family discussion turned into an emotional storm. Tears, shouting, disbelief. Even Princess Beatrice was seen arriving with a pale face and trembling hands, while her sister Eugenie stayed away entirely, too distraught to face the chaos. And through it all, Sarah Ferguson's world, the one she'd spent 40 years holding together, began to collapse. The title that once gave her purpose was gone. The royal safety net was gone. And soon, even her closest supporters would begin to pull away. But losing a name was only the beginning. Because as Sarah's title vanished, so did her reputation, her allies, and the fragile peace inside the royal household. Inside the walls of Royal Lodge, what followed wasn't just grief, it was chaos. For years, Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew had lived in a strange peace, divorced but inseparable, sharing the same mansion, the same routine, and the same royal shadow. But once the titles were gone, that fragile balance shattered overnight. Insiders describe the scene as heartbreaking. Sarah reportedly broke down when Andrew told her it was official. She cried, begged, and shouted, pleading with him to reconsider. For nearly 40 years, Duchess had been more than just a title. It was her identity, her business, and her last connection to a life of power and privilege. Without it, she feared she was nothing. Her friends say she hasn't taken the change well. Some described her as barely eating, isolated, and haunted by anxiety. Her sister flew in from Australia to stay by her side. The once lively Fergie, the woman known for her humor and resilience, was suddenly fragile, struggling to hold herself together. And outside those gates, the world was watching. Within hours of the title announcement, charities began cutting ties. Organizations she had represented for decades quietly dropped her from their rosters. The Teenage Cancer Trust, Julia's House, and several others, gone in a single weekend. For someone who had built her second act around philanthropy and public goodwill, the rejection hit hard. Even worse, old scandals were resurfacing. Emails linking her to Jeffrey Epstein's inner circle reappeared in the tabloids. Royal experts questioned her judgment. Critics called her brand toxic. And as the media piled on, it became clear that losing her title was just one part of a much bigger unraveling. At Royal Lodge, tempers flared. Andrew felt cornered by his brother, humiliated by the press, and betrayed by his own decisions. The once united York family, the quirky, close-knit branch of the Windsors, had splintered. Now, behind closed doors, they weren't just fighting the monarchy or the media, they were fighting each other. And for Sarah, every piece of her carefully managed world, her title, her reputation, her family's peace, seemed to be slipping through her fingers. But this wasn't just about one woman's meltdown, because what came next would threaten to drag the entire York legacy and perhaps even the royal family itself into dangerous new territory.
Let's talk about Fergie and what's going to happen with her, because the reports are that King Charles has vowed to protect Beatrice and Eugenie, whereas Fergie, Sarah Ferguson, faces life without her title, Duchess of York. Of course, she agreed not to use it after Prince Andrew relinquished his Duke title.
While Sarah Ferguson struggled to come to terms with her loss, the monarchy was quietly recalibrating. Behind closed doors, King Charles was determined to restore what he saw as discipline and dignity to the royal institution, and that meant making painful cuts, starting with the Yorks. To the palace, the decision was strategic. The York brand, once colourful and endearing, had become radioactive. Between Andrew's controversies and Sarah's scandals, every headline tied to their name risked dragging the crown back into the mud. The king had made up his mind. Indulgence was over, and distance was survival. But the fallout didn't stop with Sarah and Andrew. Their daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, suddenly found themselves in the middle of a royal storm they didn't create. Both women had worked hard to build respectable lives outside the palace, one in finance, the other in the arts. Yet the family's troubles kept pulling them back in. Royal insiders say the sisters were blindsided. Andrew hadn't even consulted them before giving up his title. Eugenie reportedly broke down in tears when she learned the news, while Beatrice tried to mediate between her parents, begging them to stop fighting. It was a crisis that shook the entire York family to its core. Meanwhile, Sarah's unravelling only deepened the tension. Her charities gone, her reputation battered, her relationship with the royals severed, and yet she remained at Royal Lodge, living under the same roof as her disgraced ex-husband. For the king, it was a reminder of everything he was trying to move past. In public, the palace said little, but behind the scenes, a clear message was sent. The Yorks were no longer the lovable misfits of the royal family. They were a liability, and the crown was done covering for them. Still, there was one line Charles refused to cross. He reportedly vowed to protect Beatrice and Eugenie, the next generation of Yorks, shielding them from the fallout that had consumed their parents. But even that royal mercy came with limits. Because, in a monarchy built on image, once a name becomes toxic, even royal blood can't wash it clean. And as the palace tightens its grip on the future, one question looms. If the York family is being quietly erased from royal life, where does that leave Sarah Ferguson, the woman who refuses to disappear?
For Sarah Ferguson, life after the title has become a strange kind of limbo. She's still living at Royal Lodge, the sprawling estate she once shared with Prince Andrew, but the walls that once symbolized privilege now echo with tension and uncertainty. Insiders say she barely leaves the property, spending most days behind drawn curtains, reeling from the loss of everything that once defined her. And for the first time in years, Sarah faces the possibility that her royal connection, the very thing that kept her relevant, may now be the reason doors are closing. Friends describe her as heartbroken but defiant. In private, she's reportedly been talking about reinventing herself again, a fresh start, away from the royal machine that she feels has abandoned her. But reinvention at 65 isn't easy, especially when every part of her public image is tied to a title she can no longer use. Her supporters say she's focusing on her health after her cancer battle, channeling her energy into writing and new media projects. She still dreams of being seen not as a disgraced duchess, but as a survivor, a woman who stumbled, fallen, and somehow managed to get back up again.
So, after nearly 4 decades in the royal spotlight, Sarah Ferguson's story has come full circle, from a young duchess adored by the public to a scandal-plagued outsider fighting to stay relevant. The title that once opened every door has vanished. The charities that once praised her have turned away, and the royal family that once embraced her has finally let go. For years, she called herself the Phoenix, the woman who always rises from disaster, no matter how bad it gets. But now, even her closest friends admit this fall feels different. The safety net is gone. The world has changed, and the scandals that once faded with time now live forever online. Yet, if there's one thing history has proven, it's that Sarah Ferguson never disappears quietly. She's reinvented herself before, through books, talk shows, and bold comebacks. And maybe, just maybe, she's preparing for one more. But whether the world is ready to forgive, or whether the royal institution will ever allow her back into its orbit, remains uncertain. Because this time, the stakes aren't just about reputation, they're about survival. The woman who once lived by her royal name now has to prove she can live without it. So, what do you think? Is this truly the end of Sarah Ferguson's royal identity, or the beginning of her most unexpected transformation yet? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoy stories that uncover the untold sides of royal life, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next.